Okay. Hello there. Good afternoon. Hello and welcome to the Economic Times IBM India Reshape Tomorrow Industrial Sector CEO Roundtable. Thank you all for joining us, all those who have joined us on the panel, as well as those who have joined us in the audience to watch and listen to this webinar. Today, we will chat on the subject Racing from Survival to Revival, Industrial Products in 2021 and beyond. We have a panel here today that will surely light up today's discussion, and I'm really looking forward to it. My name is Alokesh Bhattacharya. I am Senior Editor of the Economic Times, and I am joined by my colleague Suchetna.
Hello everyone, I'm Suchetna Ray, Senior Assistant Editor with Economic Times. I welcome you all today to today's discussion. Industrial sector is a central nerve that helps manufacturing industries function, making the sector act extremely critical to our economy. So we look forward to taking home a lot of insights after today's discussion.
Right. So let's introduce the panel quickly to everybody. We have Arun Misra, the CEO and whole-time director of Hindustan Zinc Limited. We have Vimal Kejriwal, MD and CEO of KEC International. We have Arvind Goel, MD and CEO of Tata AutoComp Systems Limited.
Also joining us on today's panel are Arvind Subramanian, MD and
Conference
CEO
is
Mahindra
being
Lifespace
recorded.
Developers, Ashok Ramachandran, CEO and President Schindler India, Shah, CEO IndiGrid.
And we have Anantshree Chaturvedi, Vice Chairman and CEO of FlexFilms International. Anant is joining us from California, so a special thanks to him. B. Santhanam, Chairman and MD of Saint-Gobain, India. And from IBM, we have Sandip Patel, Managing Director, IBM India and South Asia.
Let's place some context before we dive into today's discussion. One element to business that the coronavirus pandemic has brought in is uncertainty. Nobody can, say for sure anymore which way the economy is headed, how long before the virus is neutralized, and even then, how long before we return to what we used to call the old normal.
Yeah, in fact, we don't even know if we will ever return to the old normal, right? You know, the Indian economy, as we all know, it tanked more than 23% in Q1. And in Q2, while everyone agrees that growth rate will be better than we anticipated earlier, it will still be close to negative double digits.
It's Alokesh is just an hour away that we'll get the GDP numbers, but
Yeah, we'll get the GDP numbers.
yeah, the other worrying thing is that the Indian economy seems to have been the hardest hit among various other comparable and advanced economies. GDP growth of Q2 is expected to be lower than 24 countries, according to early estimates, and they are being put out by various agencies. And the forecasts for FY21 are also pretty dismal.
At the same time, there are some bright spots. So let's not all get very, sad about the whole situation. Several global leaders who have been talking to Economic Times of industrial companies, they have said that they continue to remain bullish on investing in India, perhaps more than in most other parts of Asia, which is actually quite a good sign. But what is the true picture, really?
It's difficult for anyone to estimate the true picture, but we have two ways to have a deeper understanding. One is the panel of top leaders that we already have here today, and the other is a survey of more than 350 CXOs that ET and Cantor have executed, which gives us some very interesting insights into what the top rung of India's leadership is thinking. But before we show you that survey, let's take a few minutes and let me invite Sandip Patel of IBM to give his opening remarks. Over to you, Mr. Patel.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting us to this great August panel. Uh, let me frame my comments in sort of three dimensions, right? And the three dimensions that I think are starting to shape the new normal. I think for industries in general, but also specifically for industrial product companies. First sort of paradigm shift is a renewed digital experience, which is emerging as a key focus as direct to consumer is also becoming more and more relevant. Second, there are new revenue streams, I think, that are starting to evolve as new ecosystems, digital ecosystems evolve. And within that, there is the quest for new annuity revenue, for new connected services with extreme automation that are starting to open up new sources of revenue. And third is, I think, the creation of making platforms where multi-tenant platforms are going to become more and more relevant. And I'll give you a few examples of where we see green shoots of this happening. So across those three dimensions, the first one is around just changing the whole experience for customers, whether it's B2B or B2C. The improved experience, having renewed products and services, these are being shaped actually by customer expectations. And as I said, this prevails both B2B and B2C. So today, even industrial product companies are building enhanced experiences that extend from searching for a product to the time that it takes to purchase and beyond. And in doing this, this is where data is starting to become the next natural resource to both enable customization at scale, but also with a view to meet understanding and meeting customer expectations. And I'll give you a couple of examples, right? Within the industrial space, the proliferation of connected devices and Internet of Things is enabling both automation, remote monitoring, but even new forms of data that were not available to our computers until now. So, for example, one production line at a modern plant might have 2,000 different pieces of equipment. Each piece of equipment could have 100 to 200 sensors that collect data continuously, generating 22 terabytes of data each month. And this is another paradigm shift in data where a lot of this data tends to lose relevance within a few nanoseconds after it's created. But that is the wealth of data that each organization holds today. So, insights based on the aggregation, curation, classification, and analysis of this data through artificial intelligence and predictive analytics that can not only increase productivity, but it also opens up new opportunities for data monetization. So, this is a whole domain of change in experience that is powered through data and analytics. That is a fundamental shift that we are starting to see, which will become even more pronounced in the new normal. Second, manufacturers that move successfully to new models, they will have a mix of connected services along with products that optimize customer performance and customer expectations. The result is clearly increased revenue and profits. But parallelly, as this world becomes more connected, enterprises are also bringing down barriers and extending collaboration across the value chain to pivot to new connected systems with the client at the center of it. There's a recent study that I just saw that says that ecosystem based business models are going to generate over 20% of global revenue pool in the next 5 years. And the direct to consumer is disrupting value chains across industries, accounting for almost 20 to 40% of sales and customer interactions, and will drive over 50 to 70 billion in new investments by 2025. So this is another whole dimension of connected ecosystems, and therefore the need for connected services along with products that is going to be very, very, very relevant. And this is where market making platforms, where you can have multi-tenanted platforms that become relevant for both industries but also cross industries, become very, very, very relevant. And I'll give you one example of something that we have been working on for quite a bit, is a platform called IBM Food Trust. It's a blockchain based cloud network that offers participating retailers, suppliers, food growers, and overall food industry providers with data from across the food ecosystem to enable greater traceability, transparency, and efficiency. So, using blockchain for
Conference is being
transactions,
recorded.
food can be quickly traced back to its source in as little as a few seconds instead of days or weeks. The IBM Food Trust uses this decentralized model to allow multiple participating members of the food chain, from growers to suppliers to retailers, to share food origin details, processing data, and shipping information on a permissioned blockchain network. Carrefour, Walmart, 3M, Emerson, these are some members of this trust. And this is again a multi-tenanted market making platform that is starting to change the whole paradigm in terms of how the food supply chain is starting to evolve. And as you can see, there are companies from different industries who are all participating in this market making platform. So there are several other examples like this, but I wanted to sort of set the context that as we move to the new normal, these are some of the paradigm shifts that we are starting to see. And it would be great to hear
Conference is
experience
being recorded.
from many of the panel members as we move forward. So I'm really excited to be a part of this panel and look forward to an engaging discussion. Back to you.
Thank you, Sandip. You're such a powerhouse of insight. I was listening to you. I was trying to think of taking away one or two takeaways from what you said, and everything is a takeaway. And it sounds awfully complex, but that's what IBM is there for, right? To simplify the complex thing. So good to have you, Sandip. Thanks for your keynote. And like Suchetna mentioned in the beginning, we have done a survey with Kantar on the challenges that industries are facing from COVID, and what are they thinking about how their companies have responded, and how are they looking at growth going forward. So I'll just run you through quickly through some of the slides of that report. The full report we can send to you, later. As of now, I'll just show you a few slides from there. And I just wanted to also, while starting this, inform the audience, we have more than 100 people who are attending, that if you have any questions for the panel, please put them in the Q&A box. Don't put in the chat box, so you'll not be able to, it has been disabled. So if you have any questions for the panel, put them in the Q&A. Okay, right. So basically, this is the CXO survey 2020. And on the challenges faced, we have 365 respondents across 270 companies, and the industries that are covered include manufacturing, BFSI, education, healthcare, retail, media and entertainment, consumer products, and telecom. This is the sector-wise distribution, which is not that critical, but what is critical is the chart on your right. If you see that, you'll realize that more than 58% are actually board members and MD, CEO level people who have participated in this survey. So the findings from this survey are actually quite relevant to you. We don't know, you might also have participated, for all you know, right? Since we did not do an industrial sector slicing specifically, so I've just taken manufacturing as a sort of proxy, because industrials very closely move into manufacturing. So if you look at how people thought of whether and when you say people, we are talking of very, very senior people like yourselves, whether you thought that your organization has managed this crisis well because of the resilient business model, you'll find that almost 60% says that, they fully agree that you've managed it very well. And specifically for manufacturing, the number is more or less the same. So a lot of people feel that the companies have actually managed the crisis quite well, and it is the business model that has held up. If you compare before the perception, remember that this is a perception survey. So if we compare perceptions before and after COVID, so most of our respondents thought that before COVID, the industries were doing very well, fairly well, right? So if you combine very good, good, and moderate, it's quite a good combination. Whereas after COVID had struck, the impact has been quite severe. That extremely negative impact has been polled by 20%, and 43% say moderately negative. So more than 63%, that's almost 2/3 of the poll, said that COVID has negatively impacted their business. This is the interesting one. If you look at, we are right now in the middle of Q3, and this is the prediction for Q3 from this CXO pool. And if you look at the left pie is the overall 365 base, and the right bars are only for manufacturing. The overall pie is completely split almost vertically down the middle in terms of whether October, December 2020 is going to be better than 21 in the YOY in the same period last year. Manufacturers feel slightly more optimistic about it. So that's a good sign. And hopefully the festive spirits would have lifted us a little more, and that would also make things a little better. What are the areas of concern? During the pandemic, these are the primary areas of concern, employee health status, empowering the remote workforce, cybersecurity, ensuring the supply chain resilience, data access from home, and the privacy and security connected with it, enhancing IT resilience, and engaging the customer virtually. And if you look at what has been the most critical, the top three really, employee health status and support services, empowering the remote workforce, and cybersecurity. These are the three topmost priority concerns for organizations, for the top management of organizations during this period that is still ongoing. We are still not over, right? COVID is still there. What are the actions that companies took during this period to ensure business continuity? These are some of the areas in which they put their money and their time in. Engaging with the customers virtually has been the topmost priority, and customers by this means, both in terms of industrials as well as the consumer facing businesses. And IT resilience and empowering the remote workforce are again in the top three. This is a no-brainer. My organization will fast track technology adoption in the future. Yes, of course, most people feel that definitely it will fast track technology adoption in the future, right? But where are you going to invest in technology? Which are the areas that companies and the top management thinks that they should put their investment dollars into for technology adoption? So these are some of the areas that are considered of prime importance, and in descending order from left to right in order of importance, it's remote workforce, data security and privacy, supply chain resilience, resilient infrastructure, cash flow management, and process automation. So let's look at the top three only. In case of remote workforce, what are the key areas of technology integration for a remote workforce? The highest polling goes for enabling innovation or R&D. And then you have engaging the customers or students virtually and to stabilize the support channels and extend core solution across multiple touch points. And the omni-channel experience is becoming very, very critical. And this is something that organizations are taking very seriously. If you look at the second, number two in that list, which is data security, these are the two primary areas where data security and privacy companies are looking at to be able to integrate data governance, protection, and threat management into the larger cybersecurity framework, and implementing a masking and obscuring method to prevent data exposure, which is such a huge and critical component in today's business. Whether you are a B2B company or a B2C company, this is a very, very critical aspect. And the third important thing in terms of supply chain resilience, these are the key areas of technology integration, right? So optimizing the product supply by tracking COVID-19 induced disruptions across suppliers, inventory visibility, resolution room, you need a virtual workspace to resolve supply chain issues, and AI for future decisions, optimized fulfillment recommendations for real-time demand forecasting, and enhanced demand forecast for critical products or regions. This is the progression of the pandemic. I hope that was slightly enlightening in terms of what you and your peers in the industry, in terms of senior management and top management, are thinking about how the pandemic is impacting them and what they're thinking about where they should be going from here and where they should be investing. If everybody is talking about technology today, but where really are you going to invest in technology? What are the important things?
Alokesh, while I was going through the Cantor survey as you were presenting it, there's an interesting thing that I saw, which is the CXOs interviewed for the Cantor survey were actually, split through the middle about their predictions of for Q3 of FY21 vis-a-vis Q3 of FY20. So I propose that let's do a quick round of crystal ball gazing here. We'll go to each one of you on the panel for a minute for your performance prediction for Q3 FY21. Yeah. And let's start with Mr. Ashok Ramachandran.
Will it be better than Q3 FY20 or will it not? Sorry, you're starting with?
Mr. Ramachandran, you're on mute, sir.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to ET for inviting me to be part of this very august panel. Very interesting question, and I know my quick answer would be the comparison, yes, but after that, I'm not too sure what's going to happen. So we will be better.
You think it'll be better?
Yeah, but just for
the better in Q3, but beyond that, you're not sure.
Correct, because of pent-up demand. Pent-up demand is catching up, but I'm not sure if it will continue for next year.
Okay.
So Subramanian,
I have to ask my customer from from Mahindra Lifespace, in fact.
I was going to him only.
We were going to going to him.
Yes, look, I tend to concur with Ashok that Q3 will certainly be better. It's already shaping up to be better than Q3 of last year. but a lot of that is because of deferred demand from the first quarter, which is a complete shutdown.
Mhm.
How much of that will sustain is still the question.
Okay. So your prediction is also that Q3 will be better than a year before. Mr. Arvind Goel, your performance prediction.
I'll
For
speak for the auto industry. I think
Okay.
certain auto industry will be better, like tractor industry and car. I
Mhm.
don't think commercial vehicles, three-wheelers and two-wheelers would be better. So
Okay.
tractors would be better. Rural market is doing well. Tractors would be better even in Q4 and maybe another 1 year to go. Tractors would be really good business.
Rural market actually started doing well, right, Mr. Goel, after the migrant labor went back and there was a good monsoon and all that. Do you expect that to sustain?
The rural market, I would say it is really extremely doing well. It's 2 years, monsoons have been good. Most of the state governments have, pardoned the loans, and the government has bought the crops at a higher prices to support the farmers and for giving free pulses and all to the all the people. So farmers are with flush with money. Actually, even the car sales are happening in smaller towns. Actually, everybody is concentrating in small towns and we are not concentrating in big cities.
Fantastic. Let's come to Mr. Santhanam. Mr.
Yeah,
Santhanam,
so
you
we
can hear.
don't have this concept of pent-up demand. We are not in that kind of a business, but across the businesses that we are in, we expect Q3 to be better on sales and probably much better on profitability.
Okay. With that, I go
compared to
the
last year. Yeah.
This time. Okay, we go to Mr. Harsh Shah of IndiGrid. So far, the unanimous decision has been that Q3 will be better. What is your prediction?
I think we also predict the same, that Q3 will be better, and more from our business perspective, which is largely electricity consumption and peak demand, which is already better in Q2. It's kind of weekly data, substantially higher than last year. I think the trend will continue. But as everyone said, I think beyond Q3, Q4, there needs to be certain fundamental growth drivers. Spending needs to start both at capex level, which is government induced or industry induced, as well as spending at the consumer end. I think that's the key items to watch for.
Right. Mr. Misra, Mr. Arun Misra, Hindustan Zinc.
So it's no, especially for our kind of business, both zinc, lead and silver, the base metal market, the prices are on the upswing and prices have increased quite considerably in last about 15-20 days. So we see a better Q3 compared to last year. The extent of difference between Q3 to Q3 and what we had between Q2 to Q2 is something we'll have to look at. I don't expect anything to, drastically change in Q4. I think the same run will continue at least for zinc, lead and silver.
Okay, Mr. Kejriwal, what do you make of Q3 vis-a-vis same period last year?
First of all, I was smiling when Arun was talking about pricing going up because I'm a customer to him. So whatever he's doing, it's impacting.
You have to pay more.
You have to pay more, it means.
Okay, that's on the lighter side, Arun. No, as far as we are concerned, see, we are a project company. So for us, projects are over 18 months, 24 months and all that. So it's not a question of pent-up demand. Even surprisingly, even in Q2, we did better than last year. Okay.
Oh,
Q3 will definitely do better because we have a large order book. So the way things are with our current order book, notwithstanding what Harsh is talking about, infrastructure spend and all that, with the current order book itself, at least the next few quarters will do better than last year. What happens after that, I do not know.
Right. After that, it's also a question of how much the pandemic sustains. Anant, let's come to you. And you talk about Q3 versus Q3 in India and maybe
absolutely.
in the US.
I'll talk in terms of packaging globally, to be honest with you, but it'll really apply to India more systematically. In packaging, actually, or packaging materials, I actually see the opposite. I see a sort of minor slowdown because the pandemic led to a lot of panic buying by a lot of customers. Food, medicine, pharma are essential products, and a lot of overstock was built up in the last couple of months. I think in the next couple of months, what I see is a lot of that overstock will get removed, and then the industry will sort of start stabilizing again to its normal demand and supply patterns. So for in the packaging space, I would say it's a little bit of the opposite of what everybody else has said here. I don't think it's going to be a bad quarter, but I don't, I think, if you look at the last 2 quarters of most packaging companies in India or the world, they've had the best quarter ever. And that's because of the surge in demand.
Right.
That demand will now sort of start to stabilize and go from there.
We come to
Okay.
Mr. Patel. There's been a lot of exuberance we see, and then we see a tapering of that when we speak to Anant. What do you make of Q3 as you interact with a lot of sectors, especially sectors which are considered to be growth drivers in India?
Yeah, so I mean, what I will say is that whilst I think there is, I keep talking about there's optimism with caution. I think to a certain extent across the industry, but I think at least in our industry and the clients we work with, I see more of a shift in terms of the thinking, right? So the thinking is around extreme digitization because of what is happening to ecosystems, customer profiles, and so on and so forth. What I do see is the shift towards the resilience, a much greater focus on cybersecurity, resilience, to ensure that we are not only coming out of this into the new normal, but actually being prepared for what else might come up. I think there is that increased caution that people have driven towards. And then I think the third area that I think people are becoming more and more attuned to, and I'm seeing the industry as a whole talking about it quite a bit in industry forums and so on, is this notion of these new ecosystems that are forming, and how do you become relevant within those ecosystems in a fundamentally different way.
Okay, and like Suchetna said, in a few hours we'll get to know how Q3 was, at least in terms of the Indian economy. And let's see, keeping our fingers crossed, hoping for some good news there so that it can lift our spirits. Let's now move into the core panel discussion, and we'll take the first question to all our speakers individually, one by one. Basically, what we are trying to understand is that the situation, of course, like all of you painted, situation is better now. Things are looking much better, but Q1 has been a washout for many industries. Many of you have faced very tough times in Q1. Must have shaken your business model to the core. So we want to know what are the primary challenges your industry faced at that time, and what challenges do you continue to face?
Specifically, let me begin with Anant for this question. Anant, the packaging films business is really a good barometer, for industrial activity. Also, since you head an international business from the US, tell us how you are faring in the American economy, as well as what challenges do you still face, and how do you plan to overcome them as you move from thriving to growing?
Sure, sure. Well, I will tell you, the first thing about the whole pandemic and Q1 was for packaging is considered an essential business. And since it's considered an essential business, the key challenge for us was we did not have really the option of shutting down. So we did not have the option of saying, oh, we're going to shut down, we're going to send people home, and that's how we're going to counteract this. All our global facilities all across the world had to keep running at all times because they were making essential, products. Because of that, the big learning curve for us was how do we actually manage to build safety norms and health and safety protocols almost overnight to counteract the effect of this virus coming inside our facilities or creating any kind of disruption. So for us, the major resources I would say in Q1 that went towards anything really were making sure how do we create a new global standard of safety. In terms of what that has taught us going forward is it taught me from a global perspective that the world is a lot more local than you realize. For the last 15 years we all were in the bent of globalization and saying globalization is a great equalizer, and regions don't matter, logistic chains don't matter, you can buy anything from anywhere and supply it anywhere to anywhere. And the pandemic taught, I think, all of us, but especially the packaging industry, that localization matters, local supply matters, and if you don't have local manufacturers, that particular segment suffers. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
Right. Thank you. That's succinct and very well put. In fact, Anand, thanks, for setting this panel on the right path. I would now take this question to Vimal Kejriwal. Mr. Kejriwal, like KC, like you said, like we all know, it's mainly in the EPC business. If you could tell us a little bit about the pandemic's impact on infrastructure. I mean, we have seen it, but coming from you, it will give us a slightly more deeper insight. For us, it looked like infrastructure development totally stopped, during the lockdown. So how has the industry dealt with it? And
So
another thing is that you also have more than 50% revenues coming from outside India. So give us a perspective, both India and outside.
So Alokesh, we operate in 3 countries. We have factories outside India, and we have projects in 32 countries outside India, spread into Middle East, Africa, Far East, Latin America, everywhere. So one thing which was very clear is that the de-risking both category-wise and geographical-wise helped us a lot. Because in the month of April, when India was completely shut down, every single project of ours internationally was operating, and all the 3 factories were operating. Okay, so
but there was a global lockdown also in place, no?
No, there was no global lockdown anywhere. Okay, most of the countries, at least we were operating in 32 countries, or in the month of April, every single project internationally was operating except India and one country, sorry, Malaysia, where they said we want to test every worker before we put them onto the site. Okay, there was no official lockdown. So that was one big difference which we saw when you look at India versus global, and that's where the question came why India GDP is going so much down as compared to other, because I think the lockdown was really very severe, especially for industries and especially for a company like us, which at the time of lockdown I had 30,000 laborers, migrant laborers working with us. Okay, and the biggest impact was how do you keep them safe, and obviously you saw everyone walking back. So we lost 15,000 of them. So the biggest impact which you had in the months of April, May was, the 15,000 people going away, and the balance 15,000 who continued with us. How do you, as Anand said, how do you protect them? How do you keep them safe? How do you ensure that, they don't get hit by the pandemic? And, if one worker gets impacted, the entire site shuts down. I think that was the biggest issue with us. And the second issue, again, I'll probably go back to what Anand said on the supply chain. Being a global company, our supply chain also was very, very global. Okay, so I think that has also made us think, saying that how do we also ensure that you have alternatives locally? Okay, you may not be able to get everything locally, but how do you develop more local thing? And I think the third thing which hit us badly was logistics, because we are in the business of working on iron and steel, fabricating, working them, and moving huge amounts of material from India globally. And it was a real mess that we just couldn't move anything out. So to us, I think these are the 3. It's better now, but even today, if you ask the logistics team, they say containers are not available. Why they are not available? Because the entire volume of international trade has gone down. So the number of ships touching the Indian shore, the number of containers available, for inward and outward, is still something which is not, I'll say, readily back to the local levels, to the earlier pre-pandemic level.
COVID levels.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'll go to Mr. Misra here. We looked at your books, and your revenue and profits both, fell in Q1 as well as Q2. So what are the challenges that you still face, and what is your strategy to overcome them?
Okay, so if you look at the net numbers, they're primarily because of the price difference. The LME of the zinc was already coming down before COVID. So I won't attribute this to COVID at all. Nothing to do with COVID. The challenges we faced because of COVID is one, the sudden stoppage of all the mines and plants. And if you stop a running facility suddenly and you restart, always there is an issue. But it took us hardly 15 days in April to come back. And May, June was highest ever productions that we logged, not only pre-COVID, but it beat all the records of last 5 years. So that is the kind of number. And if you quarter to numbers in tons terms, not in the dollar terms, but in the volume terms, if you look at, they were also one of the highest in last 5 years. So it is the turnaround with respect to COVID, both operational strategy wise and capability wise, it was very fast in our company. And one of the things that I would like to put on record is we have tremendous faith in human beings' innovativeness, and especially Indians. I don't think had government for environment or other norms taken out a guideline that people have to wear masks, people would have complied. And here in COVID, with such a speed, industries put up so many facilities inside the plant to take care of health, alternative accommodation, reduce footfall, change all vehicle that carried people onto the shop floor, sanitize them number of times. I don't think typically without a policing culture, would industry have automatically done that. This is one that if industry wants, they can do tremendous, work without even anybody supervising it. That is the innovation. I think that's a positive point for us. And second is Indians also know, how to live up to the situation. There's a huge cry within my company that situation is bad, cut costs, push up the productions, even if the prices are not good, produce more. So that kind of drive among the workforce was very key to us. And I believe that is that feeling of maybe because of we are a so-called emerging economy, so there is always a tendency to fight back. So that's, I
That's
think,
good.
great spirit.
Terrific. And it is very interesting to know that, that you have performed some of the, returned some of the best, performances in a few years, like you say. And we'll come to you for a little more detail on that. And how did you manage to do that in this kind of time? I'll come to Arvind Goel of Tata AutoComp. Mr. Goel, this automotive industry, as we all know, was very, very badly hit in Q1. Right? April, I think the sales were zero, and for the first time ever, right? And I have tracked auto for a very long time, and quite shocking the April numbers were. But since then, things have changed. I think the festival season has also done well, and like you said in your opening remarks, also, rural India is looking good. And do you expect this, growth to sustain? And that is one question. The other thing is that you also have several joint ventures with global players, like global auto component players and all. So give us again, an India and a global sense of what the auto industry is going
The auto industry, even though the sales in the festive season has come back, especially in the cars and two-wheelers, but see, Bharat Stage 6, which is equivalent to Euro 6, was started in April. Everyone has made a huge investment into it. We also made huge investments into electric vehicles, expecting that this year would be extremely good, and in the future, because such a large investment has been made by virtually everyone. And so a lot of small industries have landed up into major problem of the cash flow, etc.
Right.
And we need to fight it out there and change suppliers, because in a car you almost have 4,000 different parts, so you have so many suppliers. A supply chain is very, very important, and supply chain got fully disturbed. And with the India lockdown, whatever we were exporting, see, we're not an export oriented unit, but 4-5% we export. And even the international OEMs were absolutely angry with the Indian suppliers not being able to supply. In fact, even though all the sentiments were anti-China, those people had to import more from China and less from India, because India was fully locked down. But nevertheless, we all have optimism on the volumes coming in the next financial year as well, unless there is a very major phase through, or the wave 3, etc. happens. If it is what is now slowly comes down, I think the auto industry looks to be optimistic about the next financial year, except for maybe heavy commercial vehicle may still take some time, three-wheeler may take time, but the rest of the industry looks to be optimistic for the next financial year. Internationally, the still not as easy. We were hoping things started moving well in Europe for us, but with the second wave, people have got shaken up there, and suddenly everybody is slowing down on buying. And but North America still looks to be okay for us. From the auto industry point of view, I think it is still okay, and we expect to be good business in the next financial year as well.
Terrific.
Okay. I was going to Harsh of IndiGrid, but I think there's been a problem with his line.
He's come back.
He's come back? Okay. Harsh, can you hear
Harsh, we
us?
were looking for you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, we're looking for you. So I want to talk to you about the power sector, where we saw a complete breakdown of demand, breakdown of demand, especially during the lockdown. though things seem to have improved in the last couple of months, but there are legacy issues to deal with in the sector, right? There's severe cash crunch. There's also the losses that have been mounting among the stakeholders of the power sector. So how has the power transmission business really been? How badly is it impacted? And what are the challenges that you foresee going ahead?
Okay. No, thanks, Sucheta. I think that's a very long question. So I'll just bucket it into three parts, okay, so that at least it can be explained well. So one is the long-lasting issues of power sector. The fundamental fact is that our customers don't pay, right? And the citizens don't pay. So there are social issues with respect to that. And then there are losses. Where the losses are parked as a country, losses are parked with distribution companies as of now.
Right.
So that's the first, with or without COVID, that is the status of the overall power sector, right? Now comes what's happening in the sector. I would say this is one of the kind of boring infrastructure sector, but a lot more transformation is happening. At the regulatory stage, as you saw, one of the first privatizations taking place, Chandigarh has started, Odisha has done it, which is a way to resolve this issue incrementally. So at least the first baby steps have started, which has been discussed for over a decade. And we are seeing first few signs of those policy level things actually getting implemented on ground now. Second, the several other Electricity Act amendment kind of change, which is also taking place in parallel. So I would say from government side, they are kind of trying to revive a lot at a regulatory and a sector stage. On a technology front, it is going through a complete upheaval, right? The rest of the world, you're moving from coal to renewable. Your lines change, your customer change, your load patterns change, everything is changing. Your devices that you are using are far more electrified now what was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And if you look at forecast 10, 20 years ahead, I think the predictions, whichever report you pick up, is going to be that there's going to be more than 90% equipment that we use will be electrified. Right? So essentially, a technology transition, not just in India, across the world, both on renewable as well as other technologies. Regulatory inflection point, I will say, playing out in the country with respect to storage, with respect to segregation of power and conductor, and a lot more initiatives there. I think these are the 2-3 environment where we were a year before, just before COVID. So already in the middle of that. So already it was pretty, I would say, exciting sector. Then came COVID. And obviously COVID, I mean, the way we have looked at it before, we should forget the 3 months of our life, right? Which we were shut down. Let's assume we were hibernating. So there is no purpose of looking at annual growth rates anymore, at least for this year. So one needs to look at quarter on quarter, which is exactly what we're doing, and that's right. So what is good is if you shut down all the lights, obviously the load will disappear. And that much cost is added into loss for most of the generators and distribution companies. But after that,
yes. So while we were hibernating, losses have been mounting with the discoms.
Exactly. But that's I would say just 2% of the problem, right? That's just 1 quarter of loss. What about 20 years of losses, right? So it's not changing the game.
It's been a legacy issue. Like they've always been in losses. I wonder how they managed to keep us power.
Yeah. So the sector has revived. If you look at it, sudden peak. The moment the lockdown opened up, the demand as well as everything is growing, right? Substantially. So clearly we see a good amount of pickup in the sector, consumption, electricity consumption, etc. So as such, COVID had just, I would say, put brakes for 3 months, but it's again back on track in terms of where it should be. The last part is transmission industry is, I mean, touchwood, insulated from both impacts because we are kind of a very small conduit in between. We are enablers. So even during the peak COVID, our revenues are not impacted. We do not have losses, and we eventually collected the money which came later in Q2 and Q3. So, but it's a small sector. But I would say we are an enabler, small sector. So transmission per se is not impacted materially. And even for operational hurdles, we were part of essential services. So we had all these so-called licenses and permits to move around to maintain assets. So as such, we are not impacted. However, I think going forward, we are clearly seeing where the technology is taking us in terms of renewable energy mix in the source, plus storage, and the regulatory environment moving in tandem with the technology. We are pretty excited if we take a 10-year horizon. I mean, quarter on quarter anyways, demand is back, so we don't worry of that. But on a 10-year horizon, we are very, very excited that this sector is going to see a lot more transformation.
Fantastic. I like the way you put it. Yeah, Anant, you have a point. But before that, I like the way you put it as exciting sector to be. This is the last thing that you want to think about, the power being an exciting sector. But
Yeah.
Alokesh, when I started covering power 10 years back, these are the exact same changes that were being proposed to the Electricity Act at that time. And see, 10 years hence, we still talk about them.
still talking about that.
Yeah, hoping these 10 years will be different, materially different from the previous 10. Anant, you wanted to make a point?
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback off what Mr. Shah said. So one of the things that we are seeing in our sector actually is the use of plastic or plastic waste, I would like to say, to become fuel for energy grids and for power supply, for supplying power. And this is primarily done through a process of pyrolysis. But if I see during COVID time, the efficiency scales of the pyrolysis process has gone up significantly because, again, the power, the situation became more local. You can collect waste more locally. You can bring it to a local distribution center or energy converter, and then power it back to the grid or power it back to a small part of the ecosystem, by converting it into furnace oil or diesel or whichever anaerobic process that you choose, which does not add to carbon emissions. So I'd just like to add that point to what Mr. Shah is saying, that that's actually a big innovative streak that we are seeing, that our industry is never really linked with power supply or electrical grids. But COVID, even pre-COVID, but especially post-COVID, we will see that as a bigger part of our segment in general.
Yeah, it's a good point. And in fact, we were having some power discussions with CEOs of discoms and other, transmission and generation companies also. And one of the things they said was that they're really doing a lot with technology. And that is something we'll come to Sandip with. But before that, I'd like to go to Mr. Santhanam from Saint-Gobain. Did I get that right? Mr. Santhanam?
Absolutely.
Oh, perfect.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So
I can go to Paris.
better
Paris, sorry, not Paris. Okay. So, yeah, Paris. So, Mr. Santhanam, we were discussing yesterday also in the drive, and that glass is such a key component, right, for industry and for homes. So, glass is everywhere. So, you can actually, apart from commercial vehicles, you can also look at glass industry movements to sort of as a proxy for economic growth trends, right? So, and given that Saint-Gobain has more than 50% market share, in this country, and so your company's performance also reflects in some way the growth trends in India. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about, do you think that COVID is a long-term debilitating force, or is it just a temporary blip? What challenges do you still see?
I think we discussed this. Our personal view is there's a good thing that has happened. It's a bad thing while it lasted. But we believe that for the industry and for the economy, you will find significant long-term takeaways. I don't know whether you recall that during this period in this first quarter especially, many economists were saying that this is a significant recession, something which will be much worse and will take us back to 1929 and all of that. But a lot of us believe that COVID has taught us a lot more. In just that first quarter, we learned much more about how to preserve the ecosystem. I think I mentioned to you that we used our considerable cash reserves to support our vendors and customer base because many of them were small and medium enterprises. We supported them, and that really helped us quite a lot. The second thing which I think Sandip was talking about, in terms of digitalization, we accomplished in those 6 months what we probably thought we'll do in the next 3 years. And so when I say 2-3 years later, when we write the story on COVID, we realized that it's like an exam where we failed for 6 months, but we came back, we did much better after that. And I think that's really the impression that I get today. Would I have said that in April, May? I'm not so sure. But retrospectively, I believe, because we are 55% in residential and commercial, 20% auto, 15% exports, 10% steel. So we really represent the $1 billion that we sell, represent the economy. We were very badly affected in Q1. But what we did in that period in terms of both cost, managing cash, all of that have significantly benefited us in Q2 and the Q3, everything. So I would say it's a long-term positive when you look at it from a from the waste reduction, elimination, digitalization, value chain creation, and many of that. I think we look at it slightly more optimistically than we were 6 months ago.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go to Mr. Ramachandran. Do you agree with what Mr. Santhanam is saying? Because you're also a global company. So, what are your views on other real estate markets that have been hit very badly by COVID? Are there any fundamental differences that you've been observing between the markets there and the market in India?
So globally, if we look at the key countries impacted in this industry, two countries stand out actually. India and US, at least from our industry perspective for the building industry, especially because India, I think, as what I can't remember. Somebody was mentioning about the strict lockdown. I think Vimal was talking about the strict lockdown. Very true. I think we had the strictest lockdown ever, and most of my global headquarters was unable to understand why. Because it's one of the few industries where we have a huge service base, where you have elevators on maintenance contracts, which is a recurring revenue business for all the elevator companies, and that business was going on in every part of the world, except in India, where we were not allowed to even go and maintain or service or even attend breakdowns. Till literally, we had a police guy caught in the elevator, and only after that we started getting permits that we can go and maintain elevators, because we were lining up for permits with the government, and we were not able to get permits. So it was very interesting how sometimes people learn a lesson, and that's how it started, right? After that, we were able to make a bit of attraction. So overall, I would say certainly India has been one of the worst impacted. But I really want to align with Mr. Santhanam's words that we see more as a positive than as a negative, because I certainly believe that it's more of a pause button than a stop button, and it's not it's when you're pausing, you're recharging. It's a bit of a war, a Sun Tzu's art of war thinking, right? When you're resting, just get ready, just get fit, just get strong, prepare your ammunition, know your competition, and get ready for the war. So I think it's given the kind of time that nobody ever will take in our lifetime. I mean, the roads are empty. You've never imagined that in Mumbai ever. So that's how it has been. And it has definitely impacted. There's no doubts about that. I think we're going back like 2 to 3 years in terms of, the industry and stuff. It's going to take that much time to recover. And we really hope that, it picks up. Especially the good thing, of course, for India is it's still a very residential market compared to, like when I used to work in Vietnam and Malaysia or even Australia. It's more of there's a good mix of residential commercial, but here it's still huge. 80% of the lifts are installed in residential buildings and stuff. So there you can see maybe, the recovery can happen quicker. And that's what everybody's hoping for as well. But overall, I would say it's a great opportunity to reorganize, rearrange, reset, and reinvigorate ourselves.
Does India continue to be an attractive destination?
Absolutely. So what is interesting is even more outsourcing is happening now, to India from a global perspective. So they realized that, first of all, putting all the money in China was a mistake, having all manufacturing, and most elevator companies had huge manufacturing bases in China. So there, a lot of opportunities started coming to India, number one. Number two, a lot of global R&D started moving to India as well. So that's happened in most companies, including us. And also global shared services, which has always been an attractive destination in India. Now it's actually kind of made more of this, more of those back offices starting to move to India as well. So I certainly see a lot of silver lining. Whilst Indian operations has not been recruiting, but the global team has been recruiting a lot in India, for India with Indians. So somewhere somebody is getting a job.
It's great to know. And yeah, Mr. Goel, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, no, the opportunity in India, I would say, is there, but I would say in the auto sector, not many things are getting materialized, because all the OEMs internationally require a large volume business. And with the type of laws, etc., for the land, etc., even though the government has been pushing for so many amendments, it is still taking time. And countries like Vietnam and Indonesia are giving us a run. And I know at least dozen of the companies which really wanted to come to India have gone there, but some are coming to India as well in the auto sector, and we have been working with many of them. So a lot of changes required, and some states in India have been doing well in attracting them, but it is still a long way to go. India has a golden opportunity to get large businesses. If they miss the boat for next 7-8 months, I think they will miss a lot of things.
Right. And Mr. Subramanian, do you happen to be buying lifts from Schindler?
Yes, we do.
They do.
Okay, fantastic. So we have so many customer relationships over going on in this panel. That's fantastic to know. So
And I would equally like to sell Ashok our industrial parts for his next manufacturing plant.
Yeah, why not? Why not? I'm sure that'll also happen. But do you agree with what Ashok said about the 2 to 3 year kind of pushback on the growth? Because reality really in India is not a uniform market also. No, it's like different places have different growth dynamics. In
Yes.
some places there's too much inventory. In some places there's too much demand. So
Yeah.
you really don't know what an integrated market India looks like. But what is your view? And we were discussing this afternoon that your Q1 numbers were a complete washout. In fact, not just yours, but entire real estate industry. How are things looking now? And really, 2 to 3 years? Do you think so?
Yeah. So look, to borrow a quote from Mark Twain, the stories of our death have been greatly exaggerated. And certainly Q1 was a death knell for the industry. The entire industry was caught in what I think of as three very vicious cycles. On the demand side, our category is a very physical, high-touch category. A lot of the research had already moved online, but finally, when a customer wants to transact, they want to visit a site, they want to see a show flat before they buy an apartment. So sales was not happening because customer visits were not happening. Those who bought could not register because the registration offices were closed. Those who registered didn't get loans because the mortgage companies were holding back, saying, I don't know whether this income is going to continue, whether this person is going to continue to have a job. So the demand side was caught in that kind of a vicious cycle. The supply side, we couldn't do any construction despite having labor on site. We were not allowed to do any construction. And because we couldn't do any construction, we couldn't do any collections. And that's a very integral part of our cash cycle. You construct and then collect, and that's how you fund the business. And then, of course, on the approval side, it appeared that the entire government machinery had moved to tackle COVID, or at least that's what the purported reason for their absence from office was. So there was no approvals happening for a period of almost 6 months. Q2 has been a very sharp rebound, as we've all discussed, and I think that's the pattern most industries have seen. If I were to look at the lessons learned, which I think many of the panelists have been teasing out, for me, there were 4 lessons. First, very loud and clear feedback from customers that homes are actually more important now than they were maybe 6 months back or 9 months back. All of us have gone through this lockdown experience, spent 24/7 with our families in our existing homes. Very often, we've not thought about the compromises we've been living with, but now they've come out very starkly in our face. So that's message number 1. I think learning number 2, given the demand side gridlock we were in, is a need to virtualize our customer engagement and experience a lot more than it has historically been. And how do you uproot those entrenched customer behaviors? Lesson number 3 was on partnerships. Again, it was touched upon by several of the panelists. The whole revival of the sector is predicated on how we work with distributors, how we work with our supply chain, and making sure we all kind of rev up together. So putting the partnerships and investing in those partnerships, not abandoning them when times are rough.
Right.
And finally, the 4th one, which I don't think we've touched upon adequately in this discussion so far, is sustainability. Our consumers, both on the industrial side as well as residential side, have come back very strongly, talking about the need to look at sustainability of their products, whether it's homes and the life cycle cost of occupying those homes, so in terms of lower maintenance and green homes, but also on the industrial side. Every one of our B2B clients is wanting to pick our facility because of it being a green facility, and that's becoming an essential criterion in deciding where to put up my next factory. I think that's going to be actually increasingly a very important factor coming out of this COVID situation.
Right, right.
Okay. I'll go to Mr. Patel.
Mr. Kejriwal has a point to
Okay,
make.
sure.
Since we are discussing real estate, I thought I'll just make a point. We have a small business where we build residential buildings for developers like Mahindra and all that. And
Mhm.
Ashok, just to answer you, in the last 2 or 3 months, the number of inquiries which you are getting from developers has shot up.
Okay.
Okay. So to me that's a good sign, saying that there are developers who now projects which were in cold storage during COVID or even slightly before COVID because of capital issues. We are now seeing a lot of them coming back to the drawing from the drawing board into actual. We have actually got a few projects. I think 5 or 6 buildings already, skyscrapers and all that. And but the only thing is that it's much more localized to cities like Pune and Bangalore and Hyderabad. Okay, than any other place. 3 or 4 cities is where we are seeing a huge demand, for residential pieces coming up now. I
That's
thought
great
I'll
to know.
just mention that.
That's very good news for real estate, which has actually had many other problems, and COVID has just been just
Correct.
exacerbated those problems. Sandeep, I'll come to you. How is technology contributing to reshaping industrial businesses? You spoke about data and the new sets of data that are coming in. So, which are the areas of businesses do you see that will benefit maximum from the deployment of data and the deployment of new technology?
So look, I mean, I think it stretches the whole gamut, as Mr. Santhanam said, and this is not unique to him. I think across the board, companies have accelerated sort of the digital transformation and digital acceleration. I think over the last 3 months that they would probably have done over the next few years, right? So that I think is working through this. So let me just maybe give you a couple of data points that may be interesting, right? So we recently with Oxford Economics surveyed about 600 industrial products executives in 18 countries this year about their digital strategies and enterprise initiatives. And what they told us is that digital initiatives are not only critical to their organization, but what they are expecting and what they are sort of seeing as an outlook is reducing operational costs clearly, and people were talking about um, to the extent of 40 to 60%, growing market share organically, which was again, this was by about 60% of the companies actually were saying that they would be able to do that. And then looking at um, factory floor data that would be that can generate some really powerful insights, particularly as you start to think about industry 4.0 type of operations like automation, artificial intelligence, internet of things, and so on and so forth. So this is where I think it's capturing not just traditional data sets, but really thinking about the new data sets that are being available, some of which is almost data in motion. They tend to lose relevance very very soon after it's created. But how do you bring that together in a human machine partnership that can propel different forms of manufacturing, gain new productivity, but also drive insights from the market that can actually help you develop both products but also connected services that are becoming a need for the market. So just one quick example I will put out there, and this I think would be relevant to anyone in the manufacturing sector or in the infrastructure sector, is iQuipo, which is a digital marketplace for financing of infrastructure and equipment that has become India's first digital platform to digitize the co-lending programs of banks and NBFCs for infrastructure investment specifically. So this is a portal that we developed with Shrey Infrastructure Finance to offer a transformational technology with the highest level of security, performance, transparency that not only offers the customers to choose from different financial institutions, but it also negotiates with them online on behalf of the financial institution to customize offers according to financing needs. So if you think about, again, the reason I brought up this particular example is this is where we see, and we are starting to see this in the area of technology, that traditional industry borders, those are starting to dissolve. And I think the notion of these new business models that are created through these ecosystems that are forming cross industries, I think that is where we will start to see both new business models, but also new revenue pools that will be developing, which, people people should be thinking about how to capitalize on them and how to gain relevance within those ecosystems.
Let me build on what Sandip just said, if I may. Real estate has admittedly been a laggard on technology adoption, right? It's probably still stuck in the literally brick and mortar world. The way we like to think about technology and the role it plays, a transformative role it plays in our industry is along three layers: the offer, the engagement process, and the fulfillment process. I think the offer to the customer itself, today with the kinds of things happening in the PropTech ecosystem, we have IoT devices that can help monitor your water usage. We have ultrasonic water meters. We have surveillance and security driven by IoT. Things that have very, very practical and compelling use cases. I'm not talking about, look, I can change the color of my ambient lighting in my living room or remotely control my curtains. That, of course, is great stuff. But there's more compelling use cases for the average customer that are becoming very real and very practical and getting deployed. On the customer engagement side, of course, digital marketing, customer engagement digitally. We recently did a launch of a project entirely without zero touch with the customer, entirely virtually, just to break this cycle that I spoke about saying that this entrenched customer behavior. If I can't buy a house, if I've not visited a project site, we said, let us throw out an experiment there and do an entire launch without ever meeting the customer face to face or getting them onto a site, which turned out to be hugely successful and path breaking. And on the fulfillment side, how do you monitor project sites remotely? How do you set up, again, using IoT sensors to check setting of cement and the temperature variation between, the core of the cement and the surface, sensors to check leakage and seepage, which is a chronic problem in our sector, things like that, which, I think if we were able to move the needle on these three dimensions, there is just tremendous potential.
Right, as Sandip had mentioned in another webinar which was about insurance, how technology can perhaps be used to improve the trust deficit that lies in various parts of the country when it comes to real estate.
Anant, you had a point.
Yeah, I'd actually also like to add one aspect of what Mr. Patel is saying that's actually hitting our industry very, very significantly, which is also for the first time ever, although technology has existed for the last 20 years, in the adoption of sensors and RFID technology in track and trace systems for packaging, which is something that has been touted for so long, but now because of COVID and because of just as Mr. Patel said, data that quickly becomes irrelevant, how do you make it relevant again? And how do you use that then to reassess which products need to go? Which markets are buying more rice as opposed to buying more wheat? Which markets are buying more potato chips as opposed to buying more Coke or whatever, or sugary drinks or juice drinks or whatever they are buying. So this kind of active data coming back from the market and being, then being used by FMCG companies and manufacturers and packaging converters to then reassess what their raw material buying should be and what their supply chain will look like. So data is starting to play a bigger role, and I believe in the future will continue to play a bigger role. And it's just one more example of what you were saying, Mr. Patel.
Right, Mr. Goel, you want to say something? I'll come to Ashok after Mr. Goel.
Look at the auto industry itself. The new players like Tesla, their market caps are bigger than any of the OEMs who have been there for 40, 50 years.
Despite selling far fewer cars.
Similarly, Neo from China, we just started a company 3 years back, has a market cap of $80 billion. This is just the starting point on the technologies, what they have brought in. But the new technologies which the auto industry is now coming in, the connected cars. Connected cars, I don't mean an autonomous cars 100%, because people just start thinking that the car is without a driver. But there's so much safety things which has to be added with sensors and connected cars, etc. Because in Europe, most of the countries are announcing that there should be a zero fatal accident with a car, even to a pedestrian. Even if you hit a pedestrian, you should not die. So much electronics and the other connected coming into the system, the technology shift is going to be huge. And you have to be very frugal from the Indian point of view. Otherwise, it will become an extremely expensive proposition. So I think technology is going to play a major role. And as Sandip had mentioned, and the digitization of everything is happening and will happen. And whoever is not going to move in this direction will perish within the next 4 or 5 years.
That has
Right.
been a
I think
constant theme with
Ashok
the
had a
post-COVID conversations. Ashok, you want to say something?
Ashok
No,
had
I
a
just
point to
wanted
make.
to,
After that, I will come to Mr. Misra.
sure. I just want to make, give one example of what Sandip was talking about digitization. So we have introduced a product which is going to be looking at digital advertising in front of elevators. You know, when you're standing in front of elevators, people are standing there for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, like hundreds and thousands, right? So we were able to come up with a product which can beam relevant targeted advertising or whatever content you want to put out there. And now what is happening is all of a sudden, you know, you can make your elevators as a profit center, not just a cost center. So you can monetize, you can sell the advertising, and then all of a sudden, you know, Arvind is very interested to talk to us because he can make more money from the elevators as well. You know, this is what I think we need to be thinking about digitization, and I think that's an opportunity that's opening up a lot of doors.
The new revenue streams that Sandip has been talking about, I mean, he was talking in a different vein probably, but yeah, this is also a new avenue, right? And
Correct.
Mr. Mishra, I wanted to, sorry, Ashok, you wanted to complete something.
That's all.
Sure. Did I stop you?
No.
Okay, Mr. Mishra, just to continue on this technology thing, your industry also deploys a huge amount of technology. At the same time, like you said, your performance has actually been quite good and better than in recent times. But what are you looking at for both in terms of technology? How is your company doing leveraging technology? And the second part of that is, what are you looking for in terms of future growth? Avenues. What's your strategy? What are the areas that you're looking at?
So luckily in our company, we had embarked on a huge digital strategy before COVID itself. So all our, perhaps one of the few Indian underground mines which are fully connected. You can see the webinar from underground mine itself, and the machines are all IoT enabled and they are connected to that. And we have got central, what they call remote operating centers or collaboration centers, where all the data flow in, and there are analysts who are looking at the data and then coming out with predictive analysis. And then to reduce cost is if you can predict an either breakage in operations or something, so which can be corrected beforehand, and that can reduce. That's the base idea on which it's occurring in its working. Along with that, in the COVID, we added a lot of face recognition programs, because most of the workmen who are streaming in, it was physically impossible to physically check temperature or whether they are wearing mask, social distancing is being maintained or not. The huge amount of technology spent we did to keep a check on workmen as they enter into the plant and get dispersed into various working places, whether the distances between human bodies are being maintained, and face masks are being applied. So those are all automated through a lot of video analytic that we employed. Saying that, the gap that I feel, and I also feel that the future that can come in for Sandip is on the IoT, we are now streaming data from equipment into a collaboration center or remote operating centers where we are doing the analytic. Now the machines have to analyze themselves and send only the alerts, because a lot of things are that machine has to do its own trending and kind of a cry for help that this is what I need. And that will be another level of inbuilt kind of analytic into the equipment. What has happened in the video analytic is cameras are actually doing the analysis and sending back the analytical analyzed version, and that has to come from machines. And the other one is there is a lot of gap in skill in data analysis. So what we have, a lot of data coming in, but the people who are analyzing the data, they are still rooted in the 70s and 80s. They are also still now following the same graphs and charts, which with a fewer data that they would have done the same. So the data analytic capability is something, and it can itself be a service industry. So that is a huge potential that I see. While the manufacturing industries may invest for data streaming and aggregating data in a combined center, but there would be another industry who would be actually skilled in data analytics, and then do the prediction and then the service provider who does the maintenance, who does the physical work, that will happen. And third, and very close to my heart, is now the data, a lot of data being analyzed. It should reduce the physical size of equipment, physical size of machines, physical size of workspace. That has to come back. Otherwise, what we are doing is the same thing remains, and we are only analyzing the data. So every machine to be, resized to its basic need of the work. There is no point adding more metal to a machine. The data would show that half of that metal is not doing any purpose in the work life. So that's a big area of work that I see in the data world.
Right.
Just
Yes,
May I
Mr.
come in on
Patel.
this? Yeah.
Sure, I was coming to you, sir.
Yeah. One of the things I think I just want to take on what Arun and others have said. I think in the factories today, a large number of us are operating at something like 20% better productivity compared to the pre-COVID for similar or better volumes. So I think this is largely happened because of all the investment that we've been making over the period of time on Industry 4.0, not in really so-called sexy technologies, but really empowering the entry-level employees to take better decisions. In fact, in one of our factories, a fairly automated factory, where the union leader was so happy that he's now doing the job of a junior engineer. That's in his own words. I'm able to take the decision that which I was going to an engineer. Now I'm able to do that. And he also said that this actually makes him look much better in front of his family, because his kids are 16, 17, and 18. He's a worker in the factory. So there is a certain number. So what is happening is the digital revolution that is happening today is really empowering the entry-level people, be it in the field, be it the customer facing, or be it in the factories. Now, this has some other implications, because you're really going to have fewer layers needed in companies to manage. I think this is a very significant shift. And the third one that I see also is stronger companies, better managed companies are going to become much better post-COVID. And I mean, this is a self-selected panel, therefore, obviously, you have picked up all the ones who have done pretty well. But you see this particular trend that's going to take place, a stronger, better managed, better led companies with a reasonable amount of vision is going to do much better post-COVID. So it's also reflecting in our Sensex and the NASDAQ and other things, because they reflect the top companies. So this is where I see empowering the entry-level employees, making them able to take better decisions. And these need not be very, very sophisticated decisions. It can be if then else, which is what normally many people in the supervisors and others do. I think there's a lot, I like what Arvind said, there's a lot of simple things that the digital can do, which is going to make a huge difference to the companies and the economy performance.
Right, I'll come to Mr. Kejriwal. I go back to a question that I asked earlier, which is that, what is your strategy for growth? I mean, there are multiple sectors and industries that you service. So where do you think your growth is going to come from? Which are those areas?
So for us, what has happened is that the COVID has been, in a way, an eye-opener again, saying that why were we able to grow even in Q2 when others were not growing? Okay, or even in Q1 we did reasonably well. I think we realized that our strategy of de-risking and diversification, whether it is in segments or geographically, okay, that was one major thing which helped us to survive and to grow. I think the second piece was that some people did talk about cash, but one of our significant focus area during Q1 and Q2 has been how to conserve cash. How do you collect cash? And there we realized that it is important to be very selective about the customers. In such time you realize who is a good customer, who is a bad customer. Someone who you want to work with and all that. So I think that has also been a good learning for us when we are going forward now. Think, with whom do you want to work? Okay, as simple as that. So to me, that's the second piece which will help us in our growth. Third is clearly new areas have been thrown up for growth. Let's say warehousing. So today we're talking about a vaccine being refrigerated at -70 or -20 or whatever thing. We all talked about data
Yes.
centers. So I think that's to me the third piece where new areas are coming up in which you need to be there, because I am essentially a construction company. I would love to construct a data center. I would love to construct a refrigerated, warehouse. That's the thing. I think the fourth thing which did not get discussed too much here is the Atmanirbhar or neighboring countries. Okay, that is also throwing up a lot of opportunities, creating a lot of turbulence. One of the reasons why growth in power sector has been pretty low has been because power was a large importer of equipment from China and technologies also. Suddenly we find that government is saying you cannot do that. And as of now, even till today, tenders are getting postponed from government entities because they are not able to make up their mind saying what they want to keep, what they want to take out. Okay. So in a way, although we've been talking very good on
Chinese equipment is more expensive also, no?
Yes.
Expensive is Alokesh, expensive is one part, but at least to put the tender specs in place, kya allow karenge, kya allow nahi karenge. That has taken them, 6
But
months
sir,
now
there are
to
some
decide.
solar wafers which you can't make without Chinese imports.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sucheta, the government is still deciding, Ministry of Power is still deciding, Power Grid is still deciding what to. So that's one part of it. But it also throws up a great opportunity for you, saying now what cannot be imported, and that's another area where you can get in. So I think there are very clearly areas where you can see that post COVID you will grow. And I think the other area what we talked about is on digitalization and mechanization and automation. I think clearly the Indian EPC industry has been a laggard in terms of automation and mechanization. We still use manual methods and all that. I'll tell you, we just implemented a small safety tool. We electrify railway lines. We have done almost 40% of the entire country's electrification of all the railway lines. And suddenly we realized that, with the COVID situation, you don't have workers. You don't have somebody who will stand 600 meters away and blow a whistle saying a train is coming. Please stop working. We are still doing that. Okay. Right. So now some of our engineers have now developed a sort of a robo camp or robo warning as they call it, which is installed 1 kilometer away. And whenever the train is coming, it senses the vibration and starts hooting. Okay. A very simple example of, you can say, digitalization or automation, whatever you want to say. So I think one area which we clearly see where we'll be able to develop is how do you use mechanization, automation, and digitalization? And coming to the question of sustainability, how do you ensure that whatever work you're doing will also pass the ESG and other norms? I think that's one area which will help larger companies to develop as compared to smaller companies.
Right. Where's Harsh gone? Harsh,
Just
where are
when we
you?
look for Harsh, I don't know where he vanishes.
Whenever we look for Harsh, he's not there. Harsh.
He's there. I think his camera is switched off.
Okay.
Anyway,
we'll come to him when he comes back, but I'll just go to...
Mr. Kejriwal made such great points which we had to take to Harsh.
Yeah, but he's not...
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back. But let's go to Anant. And Anant, basically, we were talking about sustainability this morning. And right, so sustainability is a big issue. It was there before the pandemic also. It's not like COVID has suddenly brought sustainability onto the table. It was there before. But COVID has made it quite clear to us that we can have a clean environment, right? We saw some amazing images that we never thought we'd see in our lifetime, right? Because of COVID. But how do you think this sustainability thing can be sustained, right? With business priorities, being top of mind, and lockdowns gone, and is sustainability going to be taken seriously after this?
Sure. I mean, I'll answer the question, Alokesh, on two parts. One is, a general sort of answer, which I think the panel will also be very, very, exact in answering. And then I'll answer the packaging part of the sustainability equation. Overall, and this was one of the questions that were asked earlier in the Q&A as well, we've now seen, how environments can clean up very, very fast, how we, a reduction in population usage of, the general infrastructure that exists, or just a general decline in emissions can lead to very, very positive effects very, very fast. How do you sustain that? So that question really comes down to now that COVID has established a new balance between what was there before and what is possible by making some changes. How do you balance that? How do you balance that as a society, and how do you balance that, sort of going forward? So the question really will fall to every business enterprise, how to incorporate, making the environment and the ecosystem around them a part of their business strategy going forward, because that's another social good that companies now realize that they can provide back. As all the other social good that companies provide, this is one of the other social goods that company can provide, is that how to create a clean environment around them and what they can do in their part to sustain that. In terms of the packaging sector specifically, and this was another question that was asked in the Q&A. Sustainability has always been part of the equation right from the beginning. So if you look at Uflex, we invented technology to convert any kind of plastic waste into 10,000 different products in 1995, because this is something that was predicted by our business, that plastics is going to run into a wall at some point of time, because it's just not a sustainable, scalable business, in sort of mass volume. But if you look at from 1995 to even now, the adoption of that technology has been meager. It's really only deployed by a handful of people all over the world. And if you look at even global sustainability standards, I would say a lot of sustainable solutions had existed for the last 10 years. And real adoption in packaging industry and sustainability has only happened in the last 2 years, where you're seeing packages that are made out of 100% post-consumer recycled waste. So you're seeing a lot of investment go towards biodegradability and biodegradable materials and things like that. So sustainability, pre-COVID, post-COVID. I would say COVID gave a pause to the sustainability agenda in the packaging industry, because the initial first 2-3 months of COVID, 4 months of COVID, it was more about demand and supply, and so sustainability took a little bit of a backseat because demand took over. However, as I mentioned earlier in our earlier discussion, Suchetna, that sustainability research took a big leap forward during COVID. And that's because, and some of the other panelists also said that earlier, that people just had more time. People had more time they were at home, they had more time to open up their old R&D projects, and they're like, oh, well, I know that, Flex makes this really unique film that's made out of a biodegradable polymer. I never had any time to really look into that before. Let me take a look at that into now, and let me, call the lead scientist or the lead R&D person in that project. And so those are the kind of requests you see. Overall,
Anant, I'll have to stop you. We are at 5:30,
yeah,
so we'll just quickly take the sustainability question to others. Suchetna, you want to just take that forward?
Yes, Mr. Misra and Mr. Ramachandran. Mr. Misra and Mr. Ramachandran, I have a question for both of you, whoever wants to take a stab at it first. That is, we're speaking about sustainability, but we all know that sustainability also has a cost. So in a COVID situation or in a post-COVID world, do you think sustainability will be able to take up the amount of mind space and business space that it took up? Or do you think it could take a little bit of a backstage? Whoever wants to. Mr. Misra?
So I think
we'll come to you, Arvind.
Okay, it is more important now. It is not that anything less important at this juncture, because this is the time when we are trying to conserve cash and also reduce cost. And I'll give one example. When in one of our powerhouses, there is a long the water line that comes through about 15 kilometers through the jungles and all that, and we went around looking for leakages, and we stopped by 1800 cubic meter per day water consumption we could reduce. So every space, and we are going for all ZLD, zero liquid discharges, and one of the RO plants was producing a sludge. During this COVID time, we put up a small conversion unit. From the sludge, produce sodium sulfate, which is what we buy for producing zinc. So there are many such cases which are actually money spinning cases in sustainability solutions, which we look at as a good investment, not at all anything different. And just before I sign off, because I have to have a hard stop at 5:30. Look at COVID. Let's not panic. Nothing has happened. It's not a banks have collapsed or there's a huge war or an earthquake or something. It's the temporary mind space, psyche of the people. And I'm very hopeful. People are people, and human beings are always, they have gone through crisis. It's a matter of couple of quarters and people will turn back. And I hope that's my positivity stays and we get a good gain out of it.
Yeah,
Right.
we've been seeing Harsh, flitting in and out of this. I think he's having some major network issues. So
I'm,
Ashok, once you,
I'm
yes,
signing out.
yes,
I'm signing out, please. Okay.
Absolutely, Mr.
thank you.
Mishra. Thank
Thank
you
you so
very much
much.
for joining us.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Harsh, there
Thank
were
you.
quite
Quick
a few
word from,
questions for you.
Sorry, yeah,
yeah,
I've had a
but one
patchy
quick word
network,
from
but yeah,
Ashok
please
and
go
then
on.
we'll come to Harsh.
Yes.
Sure. I really echo, same thoughts as Mr. Mishra. I think sustainability, I don't necessarily believe that it's a cost always. Eventually, it actually works out to be cost neutral. And the commitment from organizations are only getting better and better from what I'm seeing everywhere, right? Whether it is global or even Indian organizations. But I want to make a point also regarding diversity. During these times, I think it's also extremely important for organizations to continue working on diversity when you're having employees being, joining the organizations. And when I talk about diversity, it's all forms of diversity, including gender, including thought process, including, the LGBT community, say young people, old people, whatever, like it's important to have the diversity. Right now, it's even more important than ever before, because only then you can really tide through crisis and come out very successful. And overall, again, I'm totally a believer of being positive about these whole things, and I think the best is going to come from India. And I'll sign off with one point. If you look around the world, India is one of the very, very few countries where the public has not revolted for lockdowns. Developed countries like US, Australia, you have people going to the center of city and protesting that we don't want to
Germany
lock
too.
down. And a so-called developing country, India, we are doing much better than any of those big economies or the so-called big economies. So I think we should be very proud the way India has handled it and how the government has handled it and how public and especially the businesses have handled. The COVID heroes are not just the doctors and the BMC workers or the government workers, but all the employees and many of the people who are representing the panel today. We have kept the economy going. Our people have worked in the field, worked in
Absolutely.
factories, and everybody is a COVID hero in my perspective. And I think hats off to all of them. Thank you so much
Very
again
well
for
said.
this opportunity, E.T.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramachandran. Sujat, now you want to go to
To
Harsh?
Harsh. Yes, Harsh, there have been some questions pending for you. Question. Did you hear Mr. Kejriwal when he was talking? He spoke
Yes.
about this being the opportunity where Atmanirbharta should be as a motto perhaps looked at, and in that he specifically spoke about the power sector, which is largely dependent on Chinese imports for equipment. So your take on that? We did counter him saying bringing in the cost factor, but you are a
We're
participant.
desperately looking for you.
Yes.
No, I think, see, the
Mr.
overall,
Kejriwal.
thank you. Overall, the cost impact of really becoming Atmanirbhar in power sector is not material. I would say, if at all, one sector where India can start manufacturing and revive growth is definitely power sector. See, the parts which we are importing or we were importing before were not really that the ones can't be made in India. They were and they could have been made in India. There are several plants starting from BHEL to local manufacturer to several people who are already existent. But just because of a cost arbitrage of few percent, they became redundant, right, over a period of time. So if at all it was to be revived, you have a technical manpower, you have ability, you have plants. So I think that's a sector which you can very quickly start domestic manufacturing. Within solar as well.
Yeah, even solar wafers.
So exactly within the solar value chain, there are two things which India cannot produce today, and part of it is solar wafer converting from silicon to wafer, and that's an area of technology that we need to look at, right? For real technology, which will take a few years to internalize. But other than the wafers, I think starting from inverters to panel to everything else can be domestically made and procured. It's just about how reliably we manufacture, and we have struggled in the past in the manufacturing in this sector to not produce reliable equipment. So I think it's up to us, and this is a good time where government is supporting with a policy action. Customers are supporting by investing more. It's, to be honest, as an opportunity for manufacturer to seize the moment and make the best out of that.
Right. Mr. Subramanian, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, look, on sustainability, I think our discourse, unfortunately, keeps getting stuck in the social good and the cost neutrality of it. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could turn this into a proposition for our customers. And let me take one example from our work recently. In one of our recently launched residential developments, we told the customers, your maintenance cost is going to be half that of the peer group. And of course, that was backed by a whole bunch of sustainability solutions we had put in place to save water, to save electricity, to have less maintenance, housekeeping, etc. But rather than tell them, look, we are IGBC Platinum certified or whatever, we said your maintenance cost is going to be half. So we took what used to be a footnote in the price sheet of an apartment and made it into the headline. And the response was tremendous. We did a survey with the customers who booked 4 months later saying, what was the reason you bought? This was one of the top 3 reasons. So there is actually uptake for sustainability if one were to package it and position it in a compelling way.
Mr. Santhanam, your take on?
Yeah, I think I'm glad because I'm part of several global sustainability committees. 50% of the research discussion that we have both in manufacturing, process technology, or products and solutions is only connected with sustainability. In the last 1 year, we've seen a tremendous emphasis globally as well as nationally on sustainability. And I think with the new Biden administration, I think this is going to become even better. So on the contrary, I believe that many companies, global or national companies, have become significantly more focused on sustainability. So therefore, I think that COVID or no COVID, whatever it is, definitely sustainability is on the agenda. Secondly, if you really look at EU, European Union's New Deal, a huge emphasis on the Green Deal. I think they're really talking about when they are going to pump prime the economy, it's going to be on greening the economy and green jobs and green manufacturing. I think that kind of an idea is coming, and I think India is in a very good position for taking care of all of that. The other subject on Atmanirbhar, we see that as a net positive because 95% of what we sell in India, we make in India. We are globally competitive, be it on glass or gypsum or ceramics. We are globally competitive. So we really believe that it gives us a huge platform, not just to export advanced products from India, but also to be able to easily substitute many of the products that are coming in India. So therefore, from our point of view, we see Atmanirbhar as positive, sustainability agenda as central, and more, it's also easier to communicate with our customers, whatever be it on sustainability. So this is really what I would like to conclude.
Thank you. And Sandip, technology companies have struggled. I mean, not so much yourself anymore, but other technology companies have also struggled, and electronic waste is a major issue in the sustainability sphere. But overall, organization-wise, from a technology company point of view, let us know your take on the sustainability.
So I'll be quick. I know we are running out of time, but I think sustainability, I think as Mr. Santhanam and others said, it is central. And even from a technology standpoint, notwithstanding some of the ongoing efforts that we continue to make around the e-waste and others, which I think will continue. We continue to see government changes and government mandates in that space. I think this has been central to even the manufacturing practices that we've been adopting over a period of time. As a matter of fact, we actually do have a green award that we award within the company to plants and groups that are actually driving sustainability in a positive manner within the company. So both internally, but also in terms of the impact that sustainability will make to the world. That is something that we will continue to drive. So it is, as Mr. Santhanam said, it's absolutely central to what we are doing.
Right, Anant, you wanted to say something?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'd like to just add that I believe sustainability will become a part of the design of any new product or service that in industry creates in the future, as well as a part of the architecture of any new project or any new anything from a building to a ship that's being built. Sustainability will be one of the core fundamentals of the design aspect of it right from the inception, and I think that's the change that we're really all should be very excited about.
Absolutely. It's been an exhilarating panel to moderate. And we completely run out of time, so I'll quickly sum up the panel and then request my co-moderator Alokesh to propose a vote of thanks. So the exuberance of all panelists were very evident. This exuberance is about better days and growth, and it was very evident. And this exuberance, as Mr. Misra put it, comes from his belief in the resilience of India and Indians to fight back. Mr. Ramachandran spoke about India continuing to be a sweet spot as foreign investors will continue to repose their faith in it. And when we speak about exuberance, we also, this panel also spoke about how COVID has been an opportunity for companies to accelerate the digital adoption. Mr. Santhanam spoke about how Industry 4.0 is not only, its adoption is not only improving efficiency, but it's heartening to see, and he gave us an example how it's empowering employees even at lower levels of the hierarchy in an organization. So overall, we also spoke about sustainability, where Mr. Subramanian gave us an example where sustainability could actually not be looked at a cost center, but looked at an opportunity for businesses. Mr. Kejriwal, you mentioned about how this COVID has presented India with the opportunity of looking at an Atmanirbhar Bharat and how this could propel future growth. So thank you all of you for these thoughts. Mr. Alokesh, your vote of thanks, please.
I just want to thank everybody. Thank Sandip and the IBM team for partnering with us and giving us this platform to have these discussions. It's really wonderful to speak with all of you. And we hope to remain in touch. And thank you all very, very much for giving us time. And all the best. And the Q3 numbers are not yet out, so keep an eye out on that.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.